Hi everyone, I hope that you are doing great so far because in this tutorial we are going to create an amazing game together and we are going to learn the fundamentals of Android app development. So this game is called the Finger Speed Game and it tests the speed of your fingers. And the scenario is we are going to have a timer at the top of the layout, and then we are going to have a text that starts from number 1000, and then we are going to give the user a way to tap on a button. So every time the user taps on that button, we are going to decrease one value from that 1000, and the user must tap on the button 1000 times before the time ends, before 60 seconds ends. So this is going to be a very exciting game. Let's go ahead and build it together. So open the Android Studio, go to start a new Android Studio project, and then let's wait. So here I'm gonna select empty activity as the template. Make sure that the phone and tablet is selected. So let's go to next and let's wait. So now we need to configure the project. What is the name? Okay. So it cannot be any simpler. I'm gonna give it a name. Let's say Finger Speed Game. The package name is specified here. The save location, the language is Java, and the minimum SDK is Android API 16. So we can change this to KitKat, because if you select KitKat Android 4.4, your app will be run on 98.1% of devices. Okay, so I think that's a good number. Let's click on finish. So the reason that I changed it to KitKat is that I want to create more modern applications that supports more modern features. Okay, and 98% is pretty good, so I don't care about the older versions of Android anymore. So let's go and do that. And in some applications, you may want to choose Android API 16 or older if you like. But for this application, I'm gonna choose the minimum SDK to be Android KitKat. So now that the project is created, first let's go to the activity underline main.xml here. So this is our layout. I'm gonna select this hello world and I'm gonna remove it. Okay, I'm gonna select it and press on the delete key on my keyboard. So let's run the application and see what we get here, because I'm going to modify the action bar and the status bar color at the top. I'm going to make them a little bit more beautiful, and then I will add some items here, a text view at the top for the timer, another text view for the number 1000, and a button here. We're going to also add some animations and make it so much interactive and exciting game. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the emulator here. So this is the Finger Speed Game. You can see that the action bar color and the status bar color, I want to change them. I don't like these colors. So first let's go ahead and open our web browser. So in this case, I'm gonna open the Firefox and I'm gonna go to google.com. Okay, and I'm gonna search for RGB colors. RGB colors, because I want to use the hexadecimal numbers for the color of the action bar and the status bar. So now let's select one of these colors here. For example, let's choose this color here. Okay, the red color or the orange color, I think it's nice. Okay, so I'm gonna choose this color. Take a look at the hexadecimal color here, FF. So I have to hover over it, FF 8000. Make sure to put the hashtag before the color when you want to use it. So let's go back to Android Studio. Let's open the project navigator. Let's go to the res and let's go to the values. Now you can see some files, the colors.xml, the strings, and the styles. Let's go to the colors.xml file, and you can see the color primary dark, and the color accent. So currently, take a look at these colors here. These are the ones that are already being used as the color of the action bar and the status bar. Okay, so for example, the color primary is used for the color of the action bar, and the color primary dark, the darker one, is used for the color of the status bar. So let's go back to the website RGB color, and now you can see that here, let's choose the darker color for the status bar. So I'm going to choose this color here for the status bar, 994C00. So let's go back to Android Studio here. Okay. Now for the color primary dark, I'm going to choose this color, 994C00. Okay. So this is the color I use for the color primary dark, and this is used for the status bar at the top. You can see this is where the clock and some of the information about the device is shown at the top, and below it we have the action bar. So this is where we want to modify the color primary. So let's go back to the RGB colors, and I'm gonna use a very light color, FF9933. So let's choose this one, FF9933. Okay, so now if you run the application, you should be able to see that now the color of the status bar and the action bar changes. Okay, let's see how it works now. So this is how it looks. Okay, the status bar and the action bar, finger speed gain. Okay, nice. Now let's go back and find a color for the background color. So I think orange goes well with a light blue or something like this. CCFFFF. So let's go back here. Let's go to the activity underline main.xml, and here just select this constraint layout inside this component tree section, or you can switch to the text tab, and here we can add a new attribute to the constraint layout. So I'm going to press an enter key on my keyboard and say background, and for the background, so let me go back here, CCFFF hashtag. Make sure to put the hashtag here, otherwise it will not work. Okay, hashtag CCFFFF. Okay, so this is the color. Let's go back to the design, and now you should see the color changes. If you want to, you can test this on the application and see how it looks here. So now it looks better. Now it's ready to add some new items here. Okay, first let's add a text view at the top. So I'm gonna just select this text view and bring it here into this constraint layout. And constraint layout is, remember, just it's used for creating advanced layouts, complex layouts. Okay, imagine that you wanna create a layout that has lots of items, it's dynamic, it works on different devices, horizontal mode, the vertical mode, I mean the portrait, okay, the landscape mode, and the tablet, and all of that stuff. You can use constraint layout to achieve your goals. If you know very well this layout, it's amazing, it works great. But sometimes you don't want to add complexity to your application, and you don't need to add. So in those cases, you simply don't use the constraint layout. You will go with the frame layout, linear layout, relative layout. So this is the constraint layout, and it needs some rules. Okay, so imagine this. Imagine that someone is living in a country, and this country has some rules, and people should obey those rules. Otherwise, there will be chaos in the country. Let's say that someone is driving in the streets, and this guy ignores the red light. What will happen? The probability of accidents will go up dramatically. Okay, and you don't want that to happen. Or let's say there is another rule in the country, and it says that maybe when you are in a social setting, when you are in a social situation, you are not allowed to talk very loud there. Okay, this is the rule. Or you are not allowed to smoke in social situations. This is another rule. What happens if someone ignores those rules? What happens if there is no rule? Okay, there will be chaos. Everybody will do whatever they want to do, and it's not good for the health of the society. So this is the same in programming in Android development. Here we've got a text view, and we are going to create some rules so that this text view will always remain at the top. It will always have a specific distance from the right and a specific distance from the left. These are the rules, and you can see these little circles around this text view. These little circles are saying, please create some rules so we can stay somewhere and be there forever. Okay, so let's create a rule so that this text view is attached to the top. Okay, and there will be a specific distance. So I'm gonna just select this little circle, and I'm gonna create a connection to the top. Okay, like this. Or on the right side inside the attribute section, you can simply click on this plus sign, so it will create a top constraint. Let's also create a connection to the right. You can either do it here inside the layout, or you can do it inside the constraint widget inside the attribute section. So I'm gonna create a connection to the right, a connection to the left. Okay, and I'm gonna just bring it down here a little bit. Okay, so now this distance that you can see from this right, left here, this distance is determined by the type of constraint that you have created. So if you go inside the constraint widget, and if you hover over this type of constraint, it says wrap content. Okay, if you click on it again, it will change to something else. So let's hover over it again. Now it should say fixed. Okay, if you click on it again, now it changes to something else. It changes to actually match constraints. So we have three types of constraints. We can either have the wrap constraints. Okay, well, the wrap constraints will allow the text view to be as large as the text inside of it. So for example, if you select this text view and enter some value as the text for this text view here, so go to the attribute section and you can find the text view here, the text attribute. So I'm gonna say Morteza Kordi, Android developer, and press on enter key on your keyboard. You can see that now the width of this text view is actually changed. Why? Because of the type of constraint I created, because of the type of rule I created for this text view. Literally, I said to this text view, okay, you go ahead, you put yourself at the top, you will have a specific distance from the left and from the right, but you will be as large as the text inside of you. Okay, this is the rule. If I increase the amount of text that I put inside of this text view, because of the rule that I specified for this text view, it's gonna always obey. It's gonna say, okay, the text is large. Okay, I'm gonna adapt to it, and I'm gonna be large too. If the text is small, then I'm gonna adapt to it again, and I'm gonna be small too. So for example, select this text view. So now let's increase the text size, and let's see what happens to this text view. So let's search for text size attribute inside the search bar for this attribute section, text size, and you can see this attribute here. I'm gonna click on this drop down menu and choose 30 SP as the text size. Now you can see that the width and the height of the text view increased again. Why this happened? Because of that rule that I talked about. First, you create the connections to the top left or anywhere else, and then you specify the type of this connection. What is the connection that you have created? It is a wrap content. It will be as large as the content inside of it, or in other words, the content decides what will be the size. Or if I click on it again, it is fixed and it cannot be automatically sized. So in that case, you need to go ahead and enter a value for the layout width and the layout height and see what happens. Okay, so you can see that the layout height is wrap content because we have only specified this rule for the width of this text view. Okay, if you want to specify a rule for the height, then you need to change the type of the connection that you have created to the top. So this is fixed. I'm gonna click on it again. Now it is what? Match constraints. Match constraints means that, notice that I created a connection to the left here. I created a connection to the right. And now the text view will be matched to those constraints. And notice that there is no left margin and right margin. So for example, if I specify a left margin of 16 here and another right margin here, 16, now it is still matching the constraints to the right and left. The text view is as large as the constraints that we have created to the left and right. But it will also consider the margins here. So this is how it works. Would you like to centralize this text inside this text view? Yes. I can go into the search bar and search for the gravity attribute. And the gravity attribute specifies the position of the items inside of the text view. What is the item? The item is the text inside of this text view. So I'm gonna select center, and now this text here is centered horizontally and vertically inside the text view. Okay, this is how it works. So now let's go ahead, select this text view. I'm gonna change the rule to wrap constraint here, and I'm gonna remove the text. So now it's time to learn about the strings.xml file, the string resources. So I'm gonna open the project navigator, go to the app, go to res, go to values, and go to the strings.xml file. So this is where you need to put your string resources, whatever text, whatever values you want to show to the user. Always put it here because maybe you want to translate your applications to other languages, and you always want to consider the best practices in Android development. So never hard code anything. So what do I mean by hard coding? Notice what is the value here for this text view. Morteza Kordi, Android developer, right? I have hard coded this value. And if you take a look at the componentry section, here it is showing me a warning that says hard coded string, Morteza Kordi, Android developer should use @string resource. Okay, so if you want to show your code to an employer, if you want to get hired as a freelancer in order to create projects, Android projects for great companies, for big companies, small businesses, in order to get accepted, in order to get hired, you need to have a high standard code. Okay, you need to consider all of these rules. If there are some warnings in your code, then this is a red flag for those employers. Okay, they don't like it. So currently there is one string resource here. This is a finger speed game, and here it is for the app name. And if you take a look at the emulator here, you can see that the game name here is appeared on the action bar. This is the same. If you change it here, it will be changed also here. So now let's add some more string resources. Let's say that here, this is the place for the timer, okay? And I'm gonna just give it the text, the time. So now I'm gonna go back to the strings.xml file, create a new string, and the name is going to be timer underline text. And then I'm gonna close it, and as the value, I'm gonna just enter the time. Okay, time. And if you go back to the activity underline main.xml, select this text view, and for the text attribute, if you search for it here, remove this value here, this hard-coded value, and just type in here time. When you do that, Android Studio suggests that you use this string resource file, timer text. I'm gonna select it, and now I'm gonna press an enter key on my keyboard so the changes will take effect. Okay, now next we are going to have another text view below this text view here. I'm gonna centralize it here, and so now let's create some connections. Let's create a connection from the top edge of this text view to the bottom edge of this timer text view. Another connection to the right, to the left. So here I'm gonna close this text, this search. So let's take a look at the constraint widget. You can change the type of the constraint that you have created, but I think that's fine. So I'm gonna drag this text view a little bit down here so there is a space. Notice that as I bring this text view down, the top margin here inside the constraint widget changes. Okay, this is how it works. So for the text, now I'm gonna go to strings.xml file, and I'm gonna create a new string resource file. So let's give it 1000 or 1000, and then close it. So let's enter the value of 1000 here. Okay, and if you go back to the activity main, select this text view for the text attribute. Let's add 1000 here. Just type in here 1000, and Android Studio will suggest you press on enter key, and now this is the value. So let's increase the text size to, let's say, 36 SP, and that's fine. So that's it. Now let's add a button here below this text view, and let's create a connection to the bottom edge of this text view, right, left, and let's bring it down here. Okay, so now for the button text, I'm gonna go ahead and create a new string.xml file, or excuse me, I'm gonna create a new string resource, and I'm gonna type in here string. So the text of the button should say tap tap. Okay, so for the name, let's say button underline text, and the value will be tap tap. So as I enter the closing tag here, it will automatically add the closing or the separating tag for me. So the value will be tap tap. Nice. Let's go back to our layout, select this button, and for the text attribute, let's search for it. Let's select here and type in here button text. Now it should change to tap tap. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, and it's nice to have it here. So that's it. This is our layout, but now we need to give these items an ID. Okay, so select this time here and go to the attribute section inside the search bar, search for ID. Okay, and you can see the ID attribute here. For the ID, let's just enter txt timer. And when you do that, sometimes it's gonna show you the update usages of text view. Always you should just click on yes. So I'm gonna check this checkbox that says don't ask again during this session. I'm gonna click on yes. So select the second text view. The ID should be txt 1000. txt 1000, and the button will be btn tap. btn tap. So now let's go ahead and let's go inside the main activity to connect the Java code to these UI elements. So go to Project Navigator, the first package, Java first package, main activity. Let's go ahead and just create some variables here. So just type in here private, a text view. So let's give it a name. Let's say timer timer text view, semicolon. Next, we need to have another text view for the 1000. So text view 1000, text view, semicolon, private button, and the button will be the tap or tap button, a tap button. Okay, so semicolon here. Now let's go inside the onCreate method to initialize these variables. So after the set content view, I'm gonna say timer text view, find view by ID, r.id.txt timer, semicolon. Next, we've got the 1000 text view. So 1000 text view, assignment operator, find view by ID, r.id.txt 1000, txt 1000, semicolon. Finally, the tap button, find view by ID, r.id.btn tap, semicolon. So this is it. Now we connected our Java code to our UI elements. Now I'm gonna create an on-click listener for the button. So I'm gonna say the tap button, tap button dot set on-click listener new, and then hold down the shift key on your keyboard, V, and select the first option, this option that Android Studio suggests, and then press on enter key on your keyboard. So now some codes are put here, and we've got the on-click method. So whenever we tap on the button, this on-click method will be executed. So first and foremost, let's go ahead and create a timer. So there is a class in Java or in Android named as countdown timer. So we can take advantage of that class. So here below these UI elements that we created inside the class, I'm gonna create another variable. So it is going to be private, so other classes won't be able to access it because it is private. The type is going to be countdown timer. This comes from the Android.os package. Okay, and then press on enter key on your keyboard, the countdown timer. So in order to give it a name, you can simply just type in here a countdown timer, so semicolon. Okay, so now let's go ahead and initialize it. So for now, I'm just gonna initialize it inside the onCreate method as soon as the application runs, but later we will initialize it when the user taps on the button. Okay, so here I'm gonna scroll down here. I'm gonna find the ending curly brace of the onCreate method. Notice as I click on this ending curly brace, it's gonna show me that this ending curly brace belongs to the onCreate method. So now I know where I am in the program. So before this ending curly brace, I'm gonna say, so simply refer to the countdown timer variable, assignment operator new countdown timer. So when you type in here countdown, Android Studio will allow you to select this option with the curly braces and the 3 dots inside of it. Just select this one and Android Studio will add some codes here. Okay, so this is the new countdown here. You can see the onTick method and the onFinish method and the ending curly brace of the countdown. So here, make sure to put a semicolon after the ending curly brace. Otherwise, it will show you an error. And we also have an error here inside a parenthesis because we need to pass the initial countdown as well as the countdown interval. So the initial countdown is 60 seconds. So I'm gonna enter the number 60. But because this is in milliseconds, we need to say 60,000. Okay, so 60,000 divided by 1,000 will be 60 seconds. Hopefully that makes sense, comma, And the countdown interval will be 1 second, right? Just like the regular clock. So after each 1 second, which will again be in milliseconds of 1,000, we want to start the countdown. It will start from 60, and the interval each time the number will be decreased in 1 second of 1,000. Okay, so the onTick method will be executed every time this number is increased according to this interval, and the unfinished is called whenever the countdown is finished. Okay, when this 60 seconds is done, then the unfinished is called. So first, notice that there is an argument or the parameter of this onTick. This is not that much descriptive. Let's give it a meaningful name. Let's say millis until finished. Millis until finished. So the onTick method will give us this argument, so we can keep track of the seconds that have been passed, and we can do something here. We can update the value of our text view every time the countdown gets triggered. Okay, so this is how it works. Now we can go ahead and create separate variables for these arguments. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna create some more variables inside the class. Let's say private, and let's give it. Let's type in here the long as the data type. So long, and the name is going to be initial countdown value. Assignment operator. So initially it is going to be 60 seconds. So I'm gonna say 60. And instead of value, let's say initial countdown in millis. Okay, semicolon, private. And the time interval will be, so just type in here, time interval of 1,000. 1 second, semicolon. Now let's go inside the onCreate method, and for this for the first argument, millis in future, I'm gonna say initial countdown in millis, and the count interval will be timer interval. So now let's scroll to the top again, because now we are going to create another variable, and we are going to name it as remaining time. Okay, so we can keep track of the remaining time. So remaining time, and initially it is 60 seconds or 60. And now let's scroll down here and go inside the onTick method. And now I'm gonna update the remaining time. I'm gonna say remaining time assignment operator. So now we have this millis until finished. So I'm gonna say millis until finished, and then so notice that this is of type long. Okay, so first I am going to convert this into seconds, and then I am going to convert the type to integer. So in order to convert this milliseconds into seconds, you need to say millis until finished divided by 1,000. Okay, semicolon. But because the type is of type long, the millis until finished is of type long, so when it is divided by 1,000, the result is still of type long. Now we need to convert it into integer. Okay, now I am assigning the result to this remaining time. So the remaining time is actually the result of this operation converted to integer. Now I can update the text view. I'm gonna go ahead and say txt timer, the timer text view dot set text remaining time. So here, because the remaining type is of type integer, and the set text method of the text view accepts only values of type string, I'm gonna convert this into string by putting plus two double quotes. So there will be no error in runtime. Okay, now let's go ahead and start the countdown. So this is where we set up the countdown here inside the onCreate method. But here, as soon as the onCreate method is called, we can also start the countdown after it is being initialized. So before the ending curly brace of this onCreate method, I'm gonna say countdown timer dot start. So next put a semicolon here. Now let's go ahead and run the program and see what happens. So let me show you the emulator, and let's wait until the application gets loaded on the emulator. So you can see that the countdown timer started from number 60. So it's gonna continue until it reaches to 0, until the timer or the countdown timer is finished. And finally, the unfinished method will be called. So inside the unfinished method, we can say toast dot make text. The context will be the main activity dot this. So we pass the context to specify that where we want to show this toast. We want to show this toast on the main activity, and the activity is a single focused thing that the user can do, a single focused layout. Okay, so now the value that I'm gonna show is that countdown finished, comma, and the length is going to be short. Finally, we need to call the show method on this toast object. Let's go ahead and run the program. Now, when the countdown gets started, okay, and when it finishes, then it's gonna show this toast message: countdown finished. Okay. So this is how it works, and we need to also find a way so that when the user taps on this button, tap, we will decrease one value from this 1000. So here inside the class, let's create a variable, and let's name it as 1000. So I'm gonna say private int 1000, and I'm gonna assign the value of 1000 to this variable, semicolon. So inside the onCreate method, we can go ahead and set the text of the 1000 text view to be this integer value that I just set here. So I'm gonna say 1000 text view dot set text, and then just refer to this 1000 plus string. So the reason that I did this is that because I'm gonna decrement this value by 1 every time the user taps on the tap button, I want the text view to get the value from this variable. Okay, the one that we set here on the layout is just a placeholder. Okay, inside the main activity Java, we are going to set the value here in code, and inside the tap button that's set on click listener, inside this onClick method, I'm gonna go ahead and decrement one value every time the user taps on this button. So I'm gonna refer to this 1000 minus, that's it, semicolon. So when I do that, when I say 1000 minus, it's gonna actually get the current value of the 1000, and it's gonna decrement one value from it, just like this. So this code that we put here is exactly the same as this code here, okay? But its syntax is more concise, it's more readable. But you can alternatively use the second version if it makes sense more to you, okay? So I'm gonna comment out this code here. Now that we decrement the value of this 1000 one by one every time the user taps on this button, now let's go ahead and run the program and see what we will get as the result. And I'm sure that we will not get the expected result because we did not update the text view after the value is decremented from the 1000. So when I tap on this tap, notice nothing happens, right? So after decrementing one value from this 1000, I'm gonna refer to the, let's say, actually 1000 text view. Okay, 1000 text view dot set text, and then refer to this 1000 and then convert it to string. Okay, so let's go ahead and run the program, and now let's go ahead and see the results. So here I'm gonna tap on this tap. You can see now it's being decreased every time I tap on this button, and the timer is still working. This countdown timer is working. So when this value, when the value that we are dealing with, 1000, reaches to 0, this means that the game is finished. But according to the timer, if this value reaches to 0 before the countdown timer is finished, then we consider the user as the winner. Otherwise, the user is actually the loser of this game, and we will show a dialogue or a toast message to the user and let him or her know that he or she has lost the game. Okay, this is how it works. So this value must reach to 0 before the countdown timer is finished. So here inside the onClick method, after setting the text of this 1000 text view, I'm going to create an if statement. Okay, so if statement is used to create or make decisions in programming. I'm going to say if. Inside the parentheses, first I have to make sure that time is remaining. Okay, so I'm going to say if remaining time is greater than 0, this means that there is a time and the countdown timer has not reached to 0 yet. And then we can also put the AND operator, so put two AND operators here, and the 1000 variable, this value, is actually reached to 0, or that's it. If it reaches to 0, then we have won the game. If it's equal to 0, we have won the game. Okay, so let's actually change this logic. Let's say if the 1000 variable is less than or equal to 0, because the user might actually, by tapping with a very high speed tapping on the button, the user might get past the 0. So in those cases, we want to prevent the user to tap again and then show the user that if there is a still time, then the user has won the game. Otherwise, the user has lost. So if remaining time is greater than 0 and 1000 variable, this value is less than or equal to 0. In that case, the user has won the game. So I'm going to say toast.makeText. The context is going to be main activity.this. This is where we want to show the toast message on. The value or the text is going to be congratulations. Congratulations. And the length is going to be short. So here I have an error. I should put a comma, and here after the text the length dot show. Okay, so now because 1000 is too large for testing purposes, I want to make sure that this logic works. So I'm gonna change the current value of this 1000 variable to, let's say, 10. Okay, this is just for testing purposes. I'm gonna change it back to 1000 after testing this logic, after testing the winning or losing logic. So here the timer has started. This is 10. I'm gonna say tap, 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 tap. Now it reached to 0. You can see that when it reaches to less than 0 also, it is saying congratulations. So in those cases, we want to prevent the user to continue, and we want to show an alert to the user so that the user can reset the game. So now let's go ahead and show an alert to the user so the user can actually reset the game. Okay, I don't want the user to continue tapping on the button so that the toast message shows over and over again. I don't want that to happen. Okay, so inside this if statement, after showing the toast message, I'm gonna show an alert. So I have already opened a Stack Overflow post about using the alert dialog builder. So I'm just gonna copy and paste this code there. Later we will refactor our code so our code are more organized. For now I just want to finish the game, and at the end I will refactor the code and I will create methods for performing particular tasks. So I'm gonna paste this code here. Just after the toast message inside the if statement, I have pasted this code. So now let's see what's going on here. First we have the alert dialog. Okay, the alert dialog is in red color, so I'm gonna click on it, hold down the Alt key or Option key if you're using Mac, and then press on the Enter key on your keyboard. When you do that, it's gonna ask you to actually import the alert dialog. So choose the one that comes from androidx.appcompat.app. I'm gonna choose this one. So now this is actually imported. So here we have something called the context. So when you just pass the keyword this as the context, it's showing us an error. The reason that it's showing us an error is that because we are inside this onClick listener, okay? And the onClick listener is actually here an anonymous inner class that implements this view.onClick listener interface. It is still a class, okay? So when you refer to keyword this in Java, you're actually referring to an object of a class. And inside this context, inside this anonymous inner class context, when you say this, you are actually referring to that anonymous class, not the main activity class. In order to solve this problem here, instead of this, you need to say main activity dot this. Now the problem is solved. As you can see, I have already done the same for this toast message. Okay, but if you are going to show this toast message in another method such as onCreate method, you don't have to use main activity.this. You can simply pass this, because there is no anonymous inner class. The only class here is the main activity class here. Okay, so let me show you the class definition here. Okay, so the keyword this refers to an object or instance of a class. So be careful about the onClick listeners because they introduce an anonymous inner class, and you have to be careful about the keyword this there. So here we have the alert dialog, new alert dialog builder, and then we pass the context. Then we have the icon. So we don't need to pass the icon for this alert dialog. I'm just gonna remove the .set icon method, because here, as you can see, the code is actually using chain codes, and first it has introduced the alert dialog.builder. You can see there is no semicolon at the end, and then it is chaining the method calls. First it is specifying the set title, so the title here could be the game, or the game is finished. The game is finished. Would you like to reset? Would you like to reset the game? So here you should use a string resource instead of just hard coding the value. So I'm just gonna copy this value or cut this value and go to the strings.xml file, create a new string resource. So the name could be alert title, and then here the value, I'm gonna paste it here. So let me remove the double quotes because we don't need them here. The game is finished. Would you like to reset the game? So let's go back to the main activity, and I'm going to refer to r dot string dot and then alert title. So the message. So the message could be, for example, something like congratulations. Okay, I'm just going to copy it or cut it, go to strings.xml file, create a new string resource, and then message or alert message, and just close it, paste the congratulations here, go back to main activity, and then just refer to r.string.message or alert message. And then we have the set positive button. So the set positive button is a button integrated to alert dialog that will allow us to add a button such as OK button or something like that, so that we can perform something when that button is tapped. So here it has already implemented the dialog interface.onClick listener and the onClick method. And take a look at the comment that says set what would happen when positive button is clicked. So finish is going to actually finish the current activity. Okay, so I'm just going to remove this code. I don't want to finish the current activity. I am going to simply reset the game. Okay, so we don't have the resetting game codes yet. We will add them, but for now let's just remove the finish when the positive button or the yes button is tapped. Then we have the negative button. Okay, so when the negative button is tapped, nothing will happen. The array will be dismissed. Excuse me, the alert dialog will be dismissed. And finally, we call the show method on the alert dialog, and done. Okay, so that's it. Now I just want to allow the user to reset the game. Okay, so first we need to add a method to our class in order to reset the game. So before the ending curly brace of the main activity class, just add private void reset the game, a pair of parentheses, and then open and close this method by using the curly braces. Okay, so when the game is reset, first and foremost, we want to specify the 1000 text view to show 1000. Okay, so at the top we have already created some variables. So for example, the 1000 is currently 10 for testing purposes. We will turn it back to 1000 later. So we already have the remaining time, and we also want to reset the counter. Okay, so now first let's say 1000 assignment operator. I'm gonna assign the value 1000 to it, and then let's say 1000 text view dot set text. So as the text, let's assign the value 1000. Okay, so make sure to turn it into a string value. So here I can just simply say plus the two double quotes, or alternatively you can use the integer dot toString. Okay, and then you just put this 1000, which is of type integer, into the parentheses of the toString. So this is a static method of the integer class that will allow you to turn an integer value into a string value. Okay, and then you can show it on the screen. So next, so this is the 1000 text view. So let's also reset the timer text view. Okay, so let's say timer text view dot set text, and then I am going to say initial, or let's just put remaining time plus two quotes, or you can use integer dot toString. So if you look at the remaining time, it is 60. So this is what we want the timer to show here. And now let's also set up the counter object. So just type in here a countdown timer, assignment operator new countdown timer. So we have the untick, the unfinished, and finally make sure to put a semicolon at the end of this curly brace. So inside the untick method, you can enter the code that will be executed according to the interval. So this countdown timer needs two arguments. The first one is going to be initial countdown in millis, comma, and the second argument will be the interval, timer interval. Okay, and let's change the argument name, this parameter name of the untick, to millis to finish. Okay, millis remained to finish, and that's it. So inside the untick method, every time that the countdown timer gets updated, we can update the text view, the timer text view. So here let's go ahead and say remaining time assignment operator, and then here we have the millis to finish. So here let's divide it by 1000 to turn it into seconds, but because this is of type integer, I'm gonna put int here, so it will be cast to integer. And finally put a semicolon at the end. Next, we just need to specify the text of our text view. I'm gonna say timer text view dot set text, and then refer to remaining time plus 2 quotes. So this is it, and in this way the untick method gets called every second, and the text view will be updated every second. And inside the unfinished method, we can end the game. Okay, or in other words, we can show an alert dialog and then allow the user to reset the game. So let's create a new method here before the ending curly brace of our class, and say private void show alert. And this method needs two parameters. The first one is going to be title, and the second one is going to be message. And then open and close this method by using the curly braces. So here let's go and just find the alert code, the alert dialog code. So if you click on these ending curly braces, Android Studio will show you the class or the block of code that this curly brace relates to. So this ending curly brace relates to the alert dialog, this one that the show method is actually called on. So I'm just going to highlight it and select the alert dialog code, cut this code, just scroll down here, go to the show alert, paste the code here. Okay, now for the title, I just refer to the parameter name. So set title, for the message, I just refer to message. So let's just refer to the message parameter for the set message method. So the set positive method text is yes, so you can change it to OK if you like. And we have this onclick method for when the button is pressed, and we also have the negative button. So for this application we don't need a negative button. I will remove the part that is related to the negative button. And finally, the show method is called on this alert dialog. So this is the whole code of the alert dialog. Now I will go ahead and show an alert dialog when the countdown timer is finished. Okay, here I'm gonna say show show alert, and then we need to specify a message, a title. So the title could be finished, and the message could be would you like to reset the game? So here, make sure to use string resources for string values. Okay, here I will only hard code string. I will add hard coded string, but the best practice is to use strings.resources file. But here, for simplicity reasons and because I don't want to waste times on the things that you already know how to do, I will just enter the text here. Okay, but the best practice is to use the string resources anytime that you can. Okay, so now that the unfinished method is called, let's go ahead and let's run the program, because now I want to try to win the game and I want to see how my application works. So tap on this button, tap, 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 tap. So now it should show the alert dialog. Okay, so it is not showing the alert dialog because I did not call the alert when the game is won by the user. So here inside this if statement that says if remaining time is greater than actually 0 and 1000 is less than or equal to 0, then show alert, congratulations, comma, please reset the game. Okay, so let's go ahead and run the program again and see how it's going to work. So now let's go ahead and tap on this button so we can win the game. Now an alert dialog is opened here. Congratulations, please reset the game. So here we need to do something. When the game is won, we want to stop the timer. Okay, the timer should be stopped, and the user should only have an option OK, and the user should not be able to cancel this alert dialog. For example, if I tap outside of this alert dialog here, this alert dialog is gone. I don't want that to happen. The user should only be able to tap on the OK button in order to reset the game. Okay, so in order to solve this problem, first let's go down here to this alert, and I'm gonna say alert dialog dot set cancelable false. So if you set the cancelable to false, the user cannot cancel the alert dialog. So let's go ahead and run the program again and see. So here, let's go ahead and click on tap. Okay, now it's showing us the alert dialog. Now let me go ahead and try to cancel. So you can see that I cannot cancel the alert dialog, but if I click on this OK, it's gone. Okay, so I want that to happen. I want the alert dialog to disappear when the user taps on this positive button, but I also want to reset the game. So I have already created a method reset the game, right? So I'm gonna call the reset game here inside the onClick method of this positive button. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run the program. Let's see how it's going to work, because now we call the reset the game inside the onClick method of the positive button. So let's win the game. So now let's go ahead and click on OK. So the 1000 is actually set to its number, it's fine, but nothing happened to the timer. Okay, so we should solve this problem now. Okay, let's go into the reset the game, and here we have this countdown timer. It's working perfectly, but before the ending curly brace of this reset the game, we need to say countdown timer dot start. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run the, excuse me, I need to put a semicolon at the end of my statement, countdown timer dot start, semicolon. So now let's go ahead and run the program. So let's win the game. Okay, now let's click on OK. So you can see that there is a confliction around this countdown timer. The current version of countdown timer is in conflict with the previous version of countdown timer. That's why I said when we click on the OK, we need to cancel the previous countdown timer and then start the new one. So in order to solve this problem here, we need to first, when the reset is called, I'm gonna say countdown timer dot cancel. Okay, so the countdown timer is going to be cancelled, and then we are going to and start the game again. Okay, so let's go ahead and run the program. So let's win the game. So it says congratulations, please reset the game. I'm gonna click on OK. Now you can see that the countdown timer is cancelled and then start it again. So now I can go ahead and win the game. So I need to tap on this button 1,000 times in 60 seconds to win the game. So hopefully that makes sense. So now, in order to make our code more reliable, inside the reset the game function, because at this point the countdown timer object is still active and it is still running, let's create an if statement and say if the countdown timer is not equal to null. Null means an invalid value. Okay, if it is not null and it is active, first we are going to set its current value to null. Okay, and then so let me cut this line of code and put it here. First we are going to cancel the countdown timer, and then we are going to set its value to null. Okay, so in this way we make sure that the countdown timer is not pointing to any objects in the memory. Okay, and then we are going to set the text view of the 1,000 text view to 1,000, the countdown timer here. After setting the timer text view to remaining time, which is actually 60, then we are going to create or initialize the countdown timer again with a valid object, and here we have this untick and the unfinished again. So that's it. When the reset game is called, we are going to actually reset the game like this. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run the program again and make sure that the application is still working as we expected without any problems. So now let me tap on this button. So congratulations. So let me click on OK. So the countdown timer is reset to its value, and the 1,000 text view is also reset. So I can click on it in order to reset the game. Okay, it's working perfectly without any problems. So what if the user cannot win the game before the countdown timer finishes? So here we need to go into the countdown timer inside the onCreate method, as you can see here. And here we have initialized the countdown timer. We have set the text for the timer text view. And here inside the unfinished method here, we can create an if statement. Okay, so let's go ahead and I am just going to use the same logic I used here to make sure that the user has won the game or not. Okay, so I'm going to copy this if statement and I'm going to paste it here inside the onFinish method. Okay, just below where it says that the countdown is finished. Okay, just below this toast message. And here I am saying that if remaining time is greater than 0 and 1000 is less than or actually equal to 0, then this means that the user has won the game. Okay, but so we can put an else block here and say, and we can simply show an alert message here for the cases that the user could not win the game. Okay, because for any other situations except this situation that says remaining time is greater than 0 and the 1000 is less than or equal to 0, okay, because this is the only scenario that the user can win the game. So if this is not the case, then the else block could be executed, and instead of congratulations we can say not interesting, and then for the message you can say would you like to try again. Okay, so this is the logic that we should use in order to specify whether the user has won the game or not. Okay, so this is it. But there is something interesting going on here because when the user actually taps on the tap button, so if this if statement is evaluated to true and the remaining time is greater than the 0 and the 1000 is less than or equal to 0, then the user has won the game, right? Okay, this is true, but inside the onFinish method of this counterdown object, here we have put the same logic here. Okay, so this is kind of unnecessary. We can remove this part. You know why? Because when the user has already has a time, okay, and the 1000 has reached to 0 or less than the 0, then by clicking on that button, so let me show you the button here, by clicking or by tapping on this tap button, then the user can actually specify, or the user can bring the game into a situation of winning the game. Okay, the winning part can only be done inside the on-click listener of this button, because if the onFinish method of the countdown timer is called, okay, then this actually means that the user could not be able to actually reach to 0 from 1000. So we can do something here. We can remove this if statement inside the onFinish method, okay, because it is unnecessary. If the flow of the game reaches to a part that onFinish method is called and the user has not win the game yet, then this means that the user has lost. So the only code that we need to put here inside the onFinish is to show alert, not interesting, would you like to try again? So we can test this. We can go ahead and run the program. So let's imagine that instead of 10 we have 1000 here, right? So I'm gonna tap on this button here a bunch of times. I'm not gonna reach to 0 yet. I'm just gonna waste time here. So tap or something like that. 4, 3, 2. Okay, so let's stop and wait until the countdown timer is reached to 0. So we have no time left, and then we're gonna see how it's gonna work. So let's click on tap again. Okay, nothing happened yet. There is no winner yet, But if the user taps on this button, then the user has already won the game, okay? Because of this logic that I put here inside the onClick method. If there is time and 1000 has reached, is less than or equal to 0, okay? So let's wait. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Notice what happens now. A countdown finish. Not interesting. Would you like to try again? So the only part that should actually be considered so that it identifies the winner is inside the onClick method. The user should tap, tap, tap until the value is reached to 0 and then finish. The user has won the game. So I'm going to click on OK again. And now I just need to click on this button to reach to 0. This is the only scenario that the user can be identified as the winner. We should not wait for the timer to let us know the winner, because if the timer reaches to 0, if this countdown here reaches to 0, then this means that the user could not decrease this number or could not finish this number process, and the user has lost the game. So this is the logic of this game. So that's it. Now we are going to debug the game. There is a bug inside our game. So here, make sure that if you just bring this area down and make sure that you can actually auto rotate, make sure that the auto rotate is turned on and you can rotate your device. And then here, so let me reset the game, and here I am going to just rotate right, so in order to see the game in a landscape mode. So when I do that, you can see that the game actually resets itself. So let's rotate left again. Now the game is in portrait mode. Now the timer is reset. So this is a bug. Okay, now take a look at the timer. It's now 52. I'm gonna rotate right. Now it is 59. So let's tap on this button here a bunch of times. Let's click on rotate left. Now it is 10 again, and the timer is 55, 54. So this is not good. We need to debug the application so it also works when it is in landscape mode without any problems, without any interruptions. So we can continue. Let's go ahead and debug the application now. So the process that I am going to teach you in order to save the game state when it is in portrait mode or when it turns into landscape mode, it can be used in all of your applications, okay? So please pay attention to what I'm going to teach you in this tutorial because it will help you to implement this feature into your future applications. So first and foremost, let me tell you why the application gets reset when it turns into landscape mode or when it gets back to portrait mode. So here, when we start the application actually gets into what I call the onCreate method. The onCreate method is the first method that gets called when you run your application, when the user taps on your application icon in order to open it. Boom, the onCreate method is called, okay? So when you rotate the device and when you turn it into a landscape mode, okay, so the layout should adapt itself to the landscape mode. In that case, a method that is a kind of similar to onCreate method, which its name is onDestroy. Here I'm gonna enter its name. OnDestroy will be called. So OnDestroy, as its name suggests, is gonna actually destroy your application. All the processes, all of your data will be destroyed. Okay, nothing will remain there. So that's why the application kind of restarts itself, because this method gets called when you rotate the device or something like this happens. Okay, when you rotate the device, everything gets restarted. And when you rotate it back to portrait mode, again, the onDestroy method is called, and then after the onDestroy method, the onCreate method is called. So how do I know that? In order to prove it to you, I'm gonna create two toast messages. But because we are creating a lot of toast messages in our program, how about creating a method that will help us to create toast messages on the fly as fast as possible? So let's say private and then void show toast. This is the name of my method, a pair of parentheses. So this method is going to have two parameters, and the first one is going to be message, and that's enough. Only two parameters, only one parameter is enough, because we're gonna only use this method inside our main activity class. So now I'm gonna say toast dot make text. So as the context, I can enter this here because this refers to an instance of the main activity class. Because I am creating this show toast method inside the main activity class, this here refers to an object or instance of the main activity, and the context, which is going to be this, is specifying where you want to show your toast message. So because I am going to show my toast message on the main activity just like this, we need to pass this, okay, comma. So the message is going to be message, comma, and the length is going to be short, the duration of the message that will be shown to the user. And finally, you need to call the show method. So now I'm gonna go ahead and put the show toast inside the onCreate method, and as the message, I'm gonna say onCreate method is called. So now let's go ahead and just copy this method and paste it inside the onDestroy method. But this time, instead of onCreate method, we have onDestroy method is called. So here I have a typo. Okay, onDestroy method is called. Let's run the program, and I'm gonna prove it to you that these two methods get called when we transform the app from portrait to landscape or vice versa. So now I'm gonna just put the app in landscape mode. Now the onDestroy method is called, and then immediately the onCreate method is called. Okay, so let's bring it back to portrait mode. Now again, the onDestroy method is called, as you can see here, and onCreate method. Okay, so if you run the application, as soon as the app runs, again, the onCreate method will be called. Notice what happens here, onCreate method is called. So this is how it works. Okay, so now in order to solve this problem of the app getting reset every time we transform the app from portrait to landscape or vice versa, we have a method called onSavedInstanceState, okay, that gets called between these two states. So let's overwrite this method, and then it will make sense. So we have the onDestroy method, the onCreate method. Now I'm gonna create onSavedInstanceState, onSaveInstanceState. Okay, so now inside the body of this method, let's show a toast here, because I want to make sure that when exactly this method gets called. So the message is onSaveInstance is called. Let's run the program. So let's go into actually the landscape mode. So the onSaveInstance is called, the onDestroy method is called, and then the onCreate method is called. Okay, interesting. So let's go back to portrait, the onSave instance is called, onDestroy method is called, onCreate method is called. Okay, so did you see what happened? First, it's gonna call the onSave instance, and then it's going to call the onDestroy method and the onCreate method. So the first method that is being called when we transform the app from portrait to landscape or vice versa, the first method that gets called is this method, and then the activity gets destroyed, and finally it is being recreated by the onCreate. Nice. So before the app gets destroyed, I'm gonna save the data. This is the trick. We are going to save the data inside the onSave instance state, and this is the method that was created by the developers in Google to help us to immediately save the data before the activity gets destroyed. Nice. So what are the information that we are going to save? Okay, so the information that we are going to save, the first one is the timer, okay, the time left, and the 1000. So here we have some variables, right? The remaining time and the 1000. These are the two variables. These are the two values that we need to save. So first, let's go ahead and save the remaining time. How? By the use of this out state that we get as a parameter from this onSave instance state. So I'm gonna say out state dot put. So when you say put, you can store a lot of data from a lot of different data types into the bundle here. Okay, we can put all. We can actually save a bundle. We can save byte array, char sequence, char array, float. But the one that we are interested in here is the put int. Okay, so it needs a key and a value. So first we need to specify the key. For the key, let's go ahead and create a separate value above inside the class. So let's say private, and let's say that it is final. So final means that this variable is cannot be changed later. Okay, private final int, and because this is key and it is final, make sure that your variable name, all of its letters or characters are in uppercase letters. So I'm gonna say remaining time key, remaining underline time. Make sure to separate your variable names by underline when you're using uppercase letters. Remaining time key, and the value is going to be let's say, so let's specify the type of the key to be string. Okay, it could be int, but I'm gonna specify it to be string, and for the value, let's say remaining time key. So the other key that we need to save is the 1000 key. So I'm gonna say private final string, and it is going to be in uppercase letters. So let's say 1000 key assignment operator, and the value is going to be 1000 key. Okay, semicolon. So now let's go inside the unsaved instance state. So output.put int. So first we need to specify the key. So the key is going to be time or a remaining time key, comma, and the value that we are going to save is the remaining time. Okay, and again output outstate dot put int, and the key is going to be 1000 key, and the value is going to be 1000. So these are the two values that we need to save here, and when it is saved, make sure to also cancel the countdown timer here, because when the onDestroy method is called, we don't need it anymore. So inside the onSave instance state, we will cancel the countdown timer, and later when the onCreate method is called, we will start it again. So now let's go inside the onCreate method here. So after initializing the variables and all of this stuff, I am going to do something interesting here. Okay, so after setting the 1000 text view.setText, I am going to create an if statement, and notice that this onCreate method has a parameter named as saved instance state. This object that is passed to this onCreate method is actually the same as this object that is passed to this method onSave instance state. So notice that the type is bundle, and the onCreate method has also this bundle. Okay, their names is different, but they are the same object. So we get the same object from both of these methods, from the onCreate method and the onSave instance state method. So here let's create an if statement inside the onCreate method, and let's say that onSaved, so let's refer to its name here, saved instance state is not equal to null. So you have to make sure that this is not equal to null, and it has object, or a valid object. Okay, because if you do not save your application data to the save instance state, then this is null. Okay, but if you save data to save instance state inside the unsaved instance state, then this saved instance state has a valid data, so we can work with it. So inside the if statement, we are going to restore the game, kind of. So let's say, let's refer to remaining time assignment operator, and then just refer to the save instance state dot. So now we can get the integer that we already saved to it. So just type in here get int, and then you need to pass the key. So the key is remaining time key. You pass the key in order to access the value, semicolon. And we also need to refer to the 1000. So 1000 assignment operator save instance state dot get int, and then you refer to 1000 key. That's it. And finally, we need to kind of restore the game so that we won't see some weird stuff on the UI, so that we won't see some interruption. We will see a smooth experience from portrait to landscape without any loss of data. And on the UI, it seems that nothing has changed. In order to do that, we need to create a new method. So let's name this method restore the game, a pair of parentheses. So we have not created this method yet, so I just called it. Let's click on this method, hold down the Alt key, and then press on Enter key on your keyboard, and then it says create method restore the game in main activity. So if you do that, the Android Studio will create the method inside the main activity, and we can now add our implementations to this method. So first, we need to get the remaining time. So in order to do that, let's create a new variable and name it as int, and let's give it the name restored remaining time. Okay, assignment operator, and then let's just refer to remaining time, semicolon. Next, we've got the int restored 1000, assignment operator 1000, semicolon, and then we are going to update our text views. So we had the remaining time text view, I believe, or timer text view. Yes, timer text view dot set text, and then refer to restored remaining time. Okay, but make sure that you turn it into a string value. And then we also have the 1000 text view dot set text, and then refer to restored 1000, and then turn it into a string value. Okay, so that's it. Now that our UI is updated, now we need to also set up the countdown timer so that it actually starts from where we stopped. Okay, so now let's say countdown timer, assignment operator, new countdown timer. Okay, so let's put a semicolon at the end of the curly brace here. And because inside the notice that here we call the countdown timer that cancel inside the unsafe instance state. When it is canceled, the object is actually emptied. Okay, there is no valid data here, so we need to initialize it again. That's why inside the restore the game method here, I am actually initialize it again. Okay, so countdown timer, assignment operator, new countdown timer. So first we need to pass there are two arguments that we need to pass to the countdown timer. The first one is kind of the remaining time, and the second one will be the interval. Okay, so the first argument that we are going to pass is going to be the remaining time. Okay, but here this countdown timer constructor needs a value that is actually in milliseconds. Okay, in milliseconds. So the remaining type is in seconds. We need to turn this into a milliseconds. How? By multiplying this value by 1000, just like this. But because this milliseconds is of type long, and this value remaining type is of type integer, we need to convert it into the data type long. But we are going to do that in a minute. First, let's put a comma here, and let's pass the timer interval here as the second argument. Okay, so here notice that it's not showing us an error, because here the first argument needs a value of type long. But here I passed a value of type integer, and I multiplied it by 1000. So this kind of was converted to long, okay, because long data type is still an integer data type. Okay, so you don't have to be explicitly specifying that your value is of type long. Okay, so because this is just a timer and we are not going to store a very large number here, I don't need to turn, or I don't need to cast this value into a long data type. Okay, it is still integer, and Android Studio is okay with that. But if you want to turn this into a long data type, before the remaining type, you can just put long here, so that Android Studio now is more satisfied that you have passed a value of type long. Okay, so here it is. I turned this remaining type into milliseconds, okay, because the countdown timer constructor needs that. Now let's go inside the onTick method, because this onTick method gets updated every time or every second according to this timer interval here. So now we can update our text view. So in this way, when the device turns into or transforms to landscape mode, it seems to the user that nothing happened, everything is normal, and the user can continue. So it's gonna create a very smooth user experience. So now we are going to say remaining time, assignment operator, and let's just refer to remaining time again. And then now we need to turn it back to seconds. Okay, so I'm gonna divide it by 1000. Okay, semicolon. So now I'm gonna press on enter key on my keyboard, and finally we need to just update the timer text view. So timer text view dot set text remaining time, and then convert it into a string value. So that's it. Now also inside the unfinished method here, you can just show an alert. So here I can go ahead and I can just copy this show alert from another unfinished method inside my program and paste it here. So that's fine. Now we can go ahead, and if you just scroll to the top here, you can see that inside the unsaved instance state, we actually saved the data, we canceled the countdown timer here, and you can see that we went into the onCreate method. We said that if saved instance state is not equal to null, then go ahead and get the remaining time from the saved instance state, and also get the 1000 from the saved instance state, and then go ahead and call the restore the game, or in other words, restore the game to where it was previously. So I'm gonna hold down the control key on my keyboard, and if you are using Mac, hold down the command key on your keyboard and click on this method to go to the implementation of this method. So here we actually get the restored remaining time by just referring to the remaining time variable, restore the 1000, and then we update the timer text view by setting the text to be restored remaining time, and 1000 text view by just referring to the restored 1000, and then we are initializing the countdown timer again, so the countdown continues working, and you can see that I am turning the remaining time into milliseconds, and the time interval is passed. Inside the untick method, we need to turn it back to seconds so we can update the text view with the proper value here. And finally, inside the unfinished method, we show an alert to the user and say finished, would you like to reset the game? Okay, so now before the ending curly brace of the restore the game, we need to start the countdown timer. So I'm gonna say countdown timer dot start semicolon. So now let's go ahead and run the program and see whether our programs or our application works properly or not. Okay, so let's wait. Okay, onCreate method is called, the timer is started. Now let's go ahead, tap. Okay, now I'm gonna turn this application into the landscape mode. Notice the timer, notice the value of the 1000. Okay, let's wait. So you can see that the timer was reset, but this 1000 is still the same value. Let's get back to portrait. So notice that the 1000 is still the same value, but the timer is being reset to its let's say initial value every time I transform the game. So there is a bug here with the timer value. So in order to debug the application, first you need to understand when exactly this error happens. So let me run the program again, because if you don't know when and where the error happens, or the bug shows itself, then you won't be able to debug the application. So when I transition the device into a landscape mode, you can see that the timer gets reset, but notice that when the onCreate method is called, the timer gets reset. Okay, because I know that when I transition to landscape mode, first the save instance method is going to be called, then the onDestroy method, and finally the onCreate method. So inside the unsaved instance state method, I have saved my data. So there is nothing wrong with this method. And we have the onDestroy method. So inside the onDestroy method, we are only showing a toast message. So again, there is nothing wrong with this method. The only method that remains is the onCreate method. There is something wrong here. We should only look at this method. So here, if you take a look at this method first, we are showing a toast message. We are initializing our UI components, and then we are setting the text of our 1000 text view. And so far, so good. There is nothing wrong with this one. But here we are also checking that if the save instance state is not equal to null, then we are going to get the saved data from the saved instance state, and we are going to restore the game. And finally, we have this onClick listener for the button. So there is nothing wrong with this button because it only gets executed when the user taps on the button, and it will decrement the 1000, and it will set text of the 1000 text view, and finally it will determine the winner. And after the onClick listener, we have something else here. We have the countdown timer. And as you saw, there is something wrong with the countdown timer here. Every time I transition from landscape to portrait, the countdown timer gets reset. So there is something wrong with the countdown timer object. Here, we are actually reinitializing the countdown timer when we transition to the landscape or portrait mode. So notice that the initialization of the countdown timer is being done twice when we transition to landscape or portrait. How? For example, here we are inside the portrait mode, right? So let me first run the program and let me tell you how it works. Okay? So when you run the program, the timer starts. Why it starts? Because of this code that we have inside the onCreate method here. Let me show you the code. The countdown timer, new countdown timer. So it starts from the initial countdown in millis, which is 60,000 that we specified here. And then here, we pass the time interval, and then we get the remaining time by dividing the millis until finished, divided by 1000, and we update the text view inside the onTick method. And the onFinish method is going to say countdown finished, and we are going to show an alert. So this is fine so far, because when the application runs, the timer runs too. But if I try to transition to landscape mode, notice what happens. It is still being reset. Why? Because, let me go back here to onCreate method. Here we said that the if saved instance state is not equal to null. So when you transition to landscape mode, the saved instance state is not null, because inside the unsaved instance state, we actually updated some of the values. We actually saved some of the values to the bundle. So this object is not null, saved instance state. And it's gonna get the values, and it's gonna go ahead and restore the game. So if you go inside the restore the game, you can see that we are actually initializing the countdown timer in order to get the saved data and just update the timer just like its previous state. So it is being done, and there is nothing wrong with this one. But after the restore game gets executed, after the restore the game method gets executed inside this if statement here, and it's done, there's nothing wrong with it, then it's gonna go ahead and set an onClick listener for the button. So when it is tapped, it will get executed, and then it is going to initialize the countdown timer again. Okay, so this is where the problem happens. This means that if we transition from portrait to landscape or vice versa, we don't want this countdown timer inside the onCreate method to get executed. Okay, we only want this countdown timer to get executed when or if this unsaved instance state or the saved instance state is actually null. If it is not null, I don't want the countdown timer to get initialized again, because if the saved instance state is not null, we are initializing it inside the restore the game method. So how can I solve the problem? Here I am going to create an if statement, and say if a saved instance state is actually equal to null, then go ahead and start the countdown timer. So I'm gonna put this code here after the countdown timer start. I'm gonna put the ending curly brace here. If that is the case, then in this case we are going to initialize the countdown timer. But if the saved instance state is not equal to null, we do not initialize the countdown timer here because it is already being initialized inside the restore the game method. So let's run the program again. Let me turn it back to portrait. So now it should solve the problem for us. Okay, so here it is the game. I'm gonna tap on this button, and now I'm gonna bring the game into a landscape mode and see what happens. So now you can see that the timer is now set to 0. Okay, so we have another error here and another bug. So let's turn it back to portrait. Okay, it is still 0. So let's see what's wrong here. Okay, so again, just like before, we need to find out when and where the error occurs. So here, the error occurs when we transition the screen into landscape or portrait mode. So it should occur inside the restore the game because this is the only place where we actually work with the countdown timer. So this means that the error is actually occurring or happening inside the countdown timer code. So go to the restore the game method, find the countdown timer code, and here notice that make sure that everything is working correctly. So here as the millis in future, I turn this into millis in seconds, the remaining time. I multiplied this by 1,000 and the timer interval is passed. So far no problem. Let's go inside the untick method and see whether there is something wrong here. So here I am assigning the remaining time its current value divided by 1,000. So that's what is causing the problem here. We should get the remaining time from the argument of the untick method, not the remaining time that we already have. This is not true. So let me change the parameter name to millis until finished, because the untick method gets executed every second according to the timer interval. So that's what caused the problem. Okay, I need to change the remaining time to millis until finished. Okay, that's it. And then you divide it by 1,000, but here, because this is of type long, here we need to turn it into an integer value. So just put a pair of parentheses and then put int inside the parentheses. Okay, so now timer text view dot set text remaining time. So let's go ahead and run the program. Now it should solve the problem. You can see that we have already solved a lot of bugs. We are dealing with a lot of bugs in our application and we need to figure them out one by one. So the only way to resolve the issue is to find out when and where the error occurs, and then based on the clues, based on your code, find out the error. So let me run the program again. Okay, so this is the timer. This is the tap. Let me tap on it again. Take a look at the timer. Take a look at this 1,000 text view. Let's transition to landscape. Okay, now you can see that the timer is still the same. It gets updated accordingly. The 1,000 is already working. Let's get back to portrait. Now it is working properly. So because this is actually an emulator, there might be some lags, but if you test this app on your real device, you won't see those lags there. Okay, so the app looks good on portrait as well as the landscape mode. Everything is fine. It's doing great. So now how about creating a menu here? So the user taps on the menu and the user can see some information about the application. Okay, so that's it. Now let's go ahead and implement a menu. So open the project navigator, go ahead and open the app folder, go to res, and then here right click on the res folder, go to new, and then go to Android resource file. So here change the resource type to menu. So scroll down or top and select menu. So here the resource type is menu, the source set is menu, the main, and the directory name is menu. So for the name, let's also choose menu as the name and click on OK. So when I do that, you can see that Android Studio has already created a directory with the name menu, and a menu.xml file is inside of it. Okay, this is the trick. So now you can see the menu.xml file. Here it is, the visual layout. If you want to, you can switch to the text tab, but you can also work with this one visually. The only thing that we need is a menu item. So I'm going to drag it here, and the menu item is added to the layout or to the menu. And on the right side, inside the attributes section, you can change its attributes. So the item could be, for example, menu item or my underline item. This is the ID. Okay, and the title could be info. You can specify an icon. So if you click on this icon here, it's going to open this window for you. So you can select some icons. So for example, inside the search bar, let's search for something like menu, and then let's select one of these icons. For example, an icon that will give us some information. Okay, so let's search for menu info. So this is good. Menu info is good. Let's click on OK. Okay, so this is the icon that I specified for it. The show as action, you can click on this flag here and just click on always. So always means that our menu item will always be shown inside the action bar. But for example, if you choose, let's say never, the user has to click on this ellipsis button on the right side corner in order to open the menus or your menu item to select it. Okay, so that's it. Click on always, apply. And for the menu ID, let's say info item. Okay, and that's fine. So now let's go ahead and implement this menu so we can see it on our application. Let's go inside the main activity file. If you don't know how to open it, go to Java, first package, main activity, and then double click on this tab in order to make this area wider. So you can see that we have lots of codes and methods here. The trick that I used most of the times in order to find a specific keyword or code or method name or a parameter is to hold down the control key on my keyboard and then tap on the F key or F letter on my keyboard. And if you're using Mac, the shortcut is a Command F. And then, for example, I want to find the reset game method. Okay, reset the game. So as I enter the name, it will show me here. And if I want to find the different repetition of this method inside my file, I have access to these icons, the previous occurrence or the next occurrence. As you can see here, I can click on them in order to find them. So hopefully that makes sense. And now let's go ahead and implement a new method for implementing the menus. So before the ending curly brace of the main activity class, I'm gonna just type in here on options, on menu options, on menu, on create options menu, choose this method, and then just remove this part that says return super.onCreate options menu. And now we need to access the menu inflator. Okay, so just type in here menu inflator dot inflate menu inflator dot. So first let's refer to get menu inflator dot inflate, and then the first value that we need to pass to the inflate method is the menu res that we just created inside the res folder, and that was r.menu dot the menu. So sometimes Android Studio cannot identify the menu file that you have put inside the menu folder. In that case, you need to go to the file and then click on invalidate caches or restart. Okay, if your Android Studio cannot recognize the menu, go ahead and do that. So I'm just gonna put comma here, and we need to pass the menu that we get as an argument from this onCreate options menu. Okay, that's it. And finally return true. So we return true to say that everything is okay, and we are ready to show this menu on this context on the main activity. So let's go ahead and run the program. And notice that this method needs to return a value of type Boolean. Okay, that's why I return true. So you can see at the top right here inside the action bar, we have this menu item. If I click on it here, you can see that nothing happens. We only have the menu item. So we need to do something here so that when it is tapped, it will show us something, a toast message maybe. So before the ending curly brace of the main activity, we need to implement another method, and that is called onOptions item selected. So the onOptions item selected gets called when the user taps on the menu item. So notice that this method has a parameter of type menu item, and its name is item. So let's create an if statement and say that if item dot get id is equal to r.id dot info item, then we are sure that the user has tapped on this menu item here, and we are going to show a toast message. So I'm going to say show toast, and then we need to specify the message. So let's display the version of the application. How? I'm going to refer to build config. So build config has the information about our application dot version name. So let's turn this. So version name is of type string. There is nothing wrong with this one. We can use it in order to display the version of our application. So, and now I think we have a compilation error in our program because this method needs to return a value of type Boolean. So I'm going to return true. Semicolon. Let's run the program and see that whether our menu item is actually working or not. Okay, the timer is started. I'm gonna tap a bunch of times here. Let's click on info. So the info is showing us this toast message 1.0. So this is the version of the application. So we can make it a little bit user friendly by saying that this is the current version of your game. Okay, check Google Play and make sure that you are playing the latest version. Check Google Play and make sure that you're playing the latest version of the game. Okay, so I put a quote here plus. So let's see. Okay, this is the string. This is the current version of your game. Check Google Play and make sure that you're playing the latest version of the game. Build config.version name. Let's say check out Google Play. Okay, so let's run the program again. Let's see what we will get as the result. So our game is becoming a complete game and everything is fine. Let's tap on this button again, click on info. It says this is the current version of your game, check out Google Play. So let's increase the duration of the message. So here, let's go back to the definition of the method, show toast message, and then I'm gonna change the length here. So how about turning this length of the toast message to an argument? Okay, so in order to do that, first you have to know what is the data type of the length. So I'm gonna say toast.length. So you can see that it is of type integer, right? So now I'm gonna put another comma here and I'm gonna create a parameter of type integer and I'm gonna name it as duration. So here, instead of saying toast.length to be long or short, I will just simply add duration. Okay, and now if I go to the on options item selected, here I can simply add a comma here and add or pass the second argument, which is going to be toast.length long. Okay, so there is still a problem because there are some places that we called this show toast method and we need to figure out, or we need to add the second argument to those methods too. So in order to solve this problem, I will just hold down Control F and I will simply search for the occurrences of the show test method inside my file. So I'm just gonna click on these arrows to find them here. So here it is, one of them inside the onCreate method, comma, and I'm gonna say toast.length short. So I'm gonna use toast.length short for most of them. Let me copy it. There are some places that I also used this one inside the onSave instance state method. Let me paste it here. So onDestroy method, and that's fine. There is no compilation error again. Let's run the program now. So let me click on this info again. So now it says this is the current version of your game. Check out Google Play and make sure that you're playing the latest version of the game. Okay, so let me scroll down here. So what was the length I used for this one? Length long. Okay, nice. So this is it. This is how it works. Let's change this 10 to 1000. So I'm just gonna go inside the onCreate method and okay, inside the class here, let's change the 1000 variable from 10 to 1000. Okay, and let's run the program in order to make sure that everything is working properly. So this is 1000, everything is fine. Let's click on tap, tap, tap. Okay, let's switch to landscape mode. Okay, it's working fine. Back to portrait mode. Nice. So it's working properly without any problems. And that's fine. Okay, so this is your game. Congratulations. There is still room to actually improve this game. For example, you can still encapsulate some of these functionalities. For example, you can put the code for, let's say, decrementing the 1000 and setting the 1000 text view here inside another method. Okay, for example, you can create a method and name it as decrement 1000, and then put this code and this one inside that method and call it here. Okay, you can do it, or you can put the winning logic inside another method, and I believe that's fine for this game. So congratulations. I will see you in the next tutorial, and I hope that you have learned a lot. If you have any questions, please post a discussion in the course and I'll be there to answer all of your questions. I'll see you in the next tutorial.